In a world where power meets passion, one man's empire will tremble before the force of love. This is the story of Kang Jae-Hyun, a powerful Korean CEO, and Stella Johnson, a Nigerian runway queen whose fire lit up his cold heart. A love story born of fate, tested by betrayal, and forged in desire. If you believe in love that conquers all, stay with us to the very end. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the notification bell so you never miss another. The night sky over Seoul pulsed with the restless glow of neon, a symphony of colors painting the avenues like brushstrokes on a black canvas. The city was alive, horns blaring, laughter echoing from soja bars, the hum of ambition woven into every alley. For Stella Johnson, stepping out of Incheon International Airport felt like walking onto a stage. The cold air rushed against her ebony skin, and the endless skyline reminded her she wasn't in Lagos anymore. This was Seoul, foreign, dazzling, and terrifying. She pulled her trench coat tighter, heels clicking against the polished floor as paparazzi swarmed the arrival hall. The world knew Stella. She was one of the most sought-after runway models. Her fierce walk had graced Paris, Milan, and New York. Now Seoul awaited her. Her manager, Anita, leaned close. "Keep your head high. Smile. Don't let them smell fear." Stella smirked. "When have you ever known me to be afraid?" But she was lying to Anita and maybe to herself. Stella had always felt at home in front of the cameras, but Seoul was different. It wasn't just another show. Rumors swirled around the city about the CEO who had bankrolled the event, Kang Jae-Hyun. They called him the Ice King. A man with money, power, and a heart no woman had ever been able to melt. She didn't know yet that fate had tied their paths together. Across town, in the tallest tower overlooking the Han River, Kang Jae-Hyun watched the news coverage from his glass-walled office. He was in his early 30s, dressed in a charcoal suit that whispered wealth without screaming for attention. His black hair was perfectly tousled, though he'd never admit the effort it took. His dark eyes, sharp as obsidian, scanned the screen as Stella's image appeared. The camera adored her. Her walk was fire, her smile both daring and elusive. She radiated confidence, but Jae-Hyun had learned to see through masks. He noticed the flicker of hesitation in her eyes as she stepped past the flashing cameras. "Interesting." "Sir," his assistant interrupted. "Do you want me to prepare for tomorrow's fashion gala?" "Miss Stella Johnson has arrived." Jae-Hyun leaned back in his chair. "She's different from the rest. Let's see how long she survives in my world." There was no warmth in his tone, only curiosity, the kind a predator reserves for prey. The following evening, the Grand Seoul Hotel glimmered like a jewel box. The gala was a universe of sequins and tuxedos, a convergence of wealth and beauty. Photographers lined the carpet, their cameras snapping like gunfire. Stella descended from her limousine with a grace that made the crowd hush. Her gown was emerald silk, hugging her curves and trailing behind her like a whisper of envy. "Stella Johnson, over here. Give us a smile." She posed, lips parting just enough to leave men breathless, eyes holding a mystery only she understood. Inside, chandeliers cast golden light over crystal glasses and murmured deals. Stella glided through the room, catching admiring stares, but keeping her composure. She was used to being desired, but she had long stopped being impressed by it. Then she saw him. Kang Jae-Hyun stood near the balcony, glass of whiskey in hand, speaking to a circle of men in suits. He didn't laugh like the others, didn't seek attention. Power clung to him naturally. His gaze cut through the room and landed on her. For a moment, the noise faded. Stella's breath caught in her throat. Those eyes, dark, unflinching, dangerous. She had faced designers who barked orders, critics who dissected her body on live television, lovers who thought they could own her. None of them made her heart skip the way his gaze did. She forced herself to look away, but fate was merciless. Minutes later, their worlds collided. Stella turned a corner, and suddenly, he was there, standing in her path. Up close, his presence was overwhelming. He was taller than she expected, the sharp lines of his jaw softened only by the faintest shadow of stubble. "Miss Johnson," he said, voice low, smooth and commanding. Welcome to Seoul. She raised a brow, refusing to be intimidated. And you must be Kang Jae-Hyun, the man everyone whispers about. A flicker of amusement touched his lips. They whisper too much. Or perhaps not enough, she countered. For the first time in years, Jae-Hyun felt something stir in him. Not annoyance, not boredom, but intrigue. Most women fawned, tripped over themselves to impress him. Stella was different. You carry yourself like Seoul belongs to you already, he said. She tilted her chin. I don't need Seoul to belong to me. I belong to myself. The words hung between them, sharp as glass. Jae-Hyun studied her, and Stella felt the weight of his silence. The chemistry was undeniable, the tension thick enough to slice. Yet neither of them stepped back. Finally, he smirked, leaning closer, his voice brushing against her ear. Careful, Miss Johnson. In my city, boldness can be dangerous. Her pulse quickened, but she refused to let it show. Instead, she smiled, slow and deliberate. Good. I've always liked danger. And just like that, the game began. By the time Stella returned to her hotel suite that night, her thoughts were a storm. She tossed her heels onto the carpet, collapsed onto the velvet couch, and stared at the ceiling. Why had his gaze lingered like that? Why did his words echo in her chest? She didn't come here for distractions. Her career was everything. Love, or whatever shadow of it she had experienced, had only ever gotten in the way. But Kang Jae-Hyun, he was not someone she could ignore. And somewhere in the city, looking out over the glittering Han River, Jae-Hyun poured himself another drink. He told himself he wasn't interested. He never was. Women were fleeting, predictable. But tonight, for the first time in years, he couldn't stop thinking about one. A Nigerian model, with fire in her eyes. The morning light seeped into Stella's hotel suite, softening the sharp edges of her restless night. She had barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw him, Kang Jae-Hyun. Those unreadable eyes, that smirk that felt both like a warning and an invitation. She dragged herself out of bed, wrapped a silk robe around her body, and stepped onto the balcony. Below, Seoul pulsed with energy, commuters rushing like currents in a river. A city that never paused, never cared who was swept away. She was used to big cities, but this one felt different. Colder. More ruthless. Her phone buzzed. A message from Anita. Mobile phone Anita. Get ready. You have a rehearsal fitting at 10. And Jae-Hyun personally asked for you to attend the afterparty tonight.
Careful with this man.
His reputation is complicated. Stella exhaled, staring into the city fog. Complicated was an understatement. She had Googled him last night, after too many glasses of wine. Articles painted him as brilliant, ruthless, untouchable. Son of a wealthy conglomerate family, but he had built his empire on his own terms. Real estate, fashion, tech. Women chased him, tabloids worshipped him, rivals feared him. And yet, the stories all agreed on one thing. He was a man incapable of love. That was fine. She wasn't here to fall in love. Or, so she told herself. At the rehearsal, Stella walked into chaos. Assistants ran with clipboards, designers barked instructions, models practiced their struts with robotic precision. But as soon as she entered, silence rippled through the room. Heads turned. Stella Johnson, whispered one of the junior models, awe in her tone. The head designer, Madame Cho, clapped her hands together. Finally, the star of the show. Stella, darling, let us see you in the crimson gown. Minutes later, Stella stood before the mirror in silk that clung to her like fire. Her reflection was striking, powerful, elegant, untouchable. She adjusted the straps and stepped onto the runway. The room gasped as she moved, each stride confident yet fluid. Magnifique, Madame Cho breathed. You're born for this. But Stella barely heard her. Her gaze had drifted to the back of the hall. Standing in the shadows, arms crossed, was Kang Jae-Hyun. Their eyes met, and the room seemed to vanish. He didn't applaud, didn't smile, just watched her with an intensity that made her heart pound. She forced herself to finish the walk, chin high, but every step felt like walking through fire. Afterward, she slipped backstage, trying to steady her breath. She didn't expect him to follow. "Miss Johnson," came that low voice behind her. She turned. He was closer than she thought, close enough to smell his cologne. Wood, spice, danger. "Do you always lurk in corners?" she asked, folding her arms. His lips curved slightly. "I was observing." "Observing what?" "How you silence a room without saying a word." Her heart skipped, but she refused to show it. "You sound like a man who's used to controlling rooms. Doesn't it bother you that you couldn't control this one?" He stepped closer, gaze never wavering. "On the contrary, I admire it." The words caught her off guard. Stella opened her mouth to respond, but his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, his expression darkening. "I'll see you tonight," he said abruptly, then turned and walked away, leaving her with 1,000 questions. That evening, the afterparty glittered with Seoul's elite. Champagne towers, velvet curtains, music that pulsed through marble floors. Stella arrived in a silver gown that shimmered like moonlight, every eye drawn to her as she entered. But her eyes sought only one. Kang Jae-Hyun stood by the bar, surrounded by men in suits and women in dresses that screamed wealth. Yet he looked detached, as if he was there, but not part of it. His gaze lifted when she approached, and for the first time that night, he smiled. "You came," he said. "You invited," she countered. "It would have been rude to decline." He chuckled softly. "Most people don't worry about being rude to me. They worry about pleasing me." "And which category do I fall into?" she asked, raising a brow. His eyes darkened, a storm brewing. "Neither. That's why you interest me." For a moment, silence stretched, heavy with tension. Then a voice interrupted. "Jae-Hyun." A tall man approached, his grin too wide, his handshake too firm. "Introduce me to your beautiful companion." "This is Stella Johnson," Jae-Hyun said coolly. "Stella, this is Park Minsu, one of my competitors." Stella caught the subtle edge in his tone. Minsu's gaze swept over her, lingering too long. "Enchanting. I see why Jae-Hyun is keeping you close." Before Stella could retort, Jae-Hyun's hand brushed her lower back, protective, possessive. "Careful, Minsu," he said softly, though his voice carried steel. "She's not yours to comment on." The other man chuckled, but there was tension in his eyes. "Always so territorial, Jae-Hyun. One day, that will be your downfall." When Minsu finally left, Stella turned to him. "What was that about?" Jae-Hyun sipped his drink, gaze fixed on her. "In this city, alliances and enemies are the same coin. Minsu is dangerous." "And what does that make you?" she asked. He leaned closer, his voice a whisper that sent chills down her spine. "The man you should be most careful of." Her pulse raced. "And if I'm not careful?" His eyes burned into hers, a dangerous promise flickering within them. "Then you'll be mine before you even realize it." Later, as she returned to her suite, Stella tried to shake off his words. But they clung to her, echoing in her chest. She wasn't sure if it was a warning or a prophecy. Meanwhile, in his penthouse, Jae-Hyun stood by the window, staring at the city lights. He told himself he didn't need her, didn't want her. But for the first time in years, he wasn't sure he believed his own lies. The rain came suddenly, hammering Seoul in silver sheets. Stella stood beneath the awning of the Grand Seoul Hotel, clutching her coat around her as the wind whipped at her hair. She hated being late, but the day had swallowed her, fittings, rehearsals, interviews. Her driver was nowhere in sight. She was about to call Anita when a sleek black car pulled up. The back window rolled down, and there he was. Kang Jae-Hyun. "Get in," he said simply. Stella hesitated. She knew she should decline. The city was full of taxis, and she didn't need him. But the look in his eyes, sharp yet softened by something she couldn't name, made her pulse falter. Against her better judgment, she slid into the leather seat. The door clicked shut, cocooning them in silence. "Convenient timing," she murmured. "Not convenient," he replied. "I was waiting." She turned to him, brows raised. Waiting?
For me?
His lips curved faintly. I told you. You interest me. The car glided through rain-slicked streets, neon lights blurring against the windows. For a moment, neither spoke. Stella could feel the weight of his gaze, the quiet storm gathering between them. Do you always get what you want, Mr. Kang? She asked finally. His voice was calm, but his eyes were fire. Always. Until now. The words hit her like a spark. She looked away, heart racing. The car stopped at a quiet restaurant tucked away from the city noise. It wasn't one of the flashy places she expected. Instead, it was intimate, warm, filled with the scent of grilled meat and garlic. They sat in a corner booth. To her surprise, he ordered for both of them in fluent Korean, his tone softer than she'd ever heard it. Soon, the table filled with dishes, bulgogi, kimchi, soft rice. You eat, he said. You've been running all day. Stella arched a brow. Have you been following me? I don't follow, he said smoothly. I observe. She laughed, shaking her head. You sound like a spy. Maybe I am, he said, a rare glimmer of humor in his eyes. For the first time, she saw something different in him. Not the ice king the tabloids described, but a man who noticed details, who listened. He poured her a glass of soju and raised his own. To dangerous choices, he said. She clinked her glass against his. To surviving them. The alcohol warmed her chest, loosening the knots of the day. Their conversation flowed. About travel, ambition, the loneliness of success. Stella found herself admitting things she rarely shared. How the runway, despite all its glamour, sometimes felt like a cage. How the cameras never saw the fear of failure, the exhaustion behind the smile. He listened, really listened, his dark eyes steady on hers. And when she asked about him, his walls cracked, just slightly. My father built empires, he said quietly. He taught me that love is a weakness. That power is the only currency that matters. And you believed him? I had to. Until now. The admission hung between them, raw and unguarded. Stella's breath caught. She had never expected vulnerability from him. Not like this. After dinner, the rain had softened to a drizzle. Instead of calling for the driver, Jae-Hyun walked her to the car himself. But when they reached it, neither moved to open the door. The air between them was charged, the city humming around them like a heartbeat. You shouldn't look at me like that, she whispered. How am I looking at you? Like you already own me. He stepped closer, his presence overwhelming, his voice low. Maybe I do. Her pulse hammered, every instinct telling her to pull back. But she didn't. She tilted her chin, meeting his gaze. Careful, Mr. Kang. I don't belong to anyone. His lips brushed the edge of a smile. Then maybe you've just never met someone who could match you. The tension snapped, invisible yet undeniable. His hand lifted, tracing a strand of her damp hair, lingering by her cheek. The touch was light, but it sent heat racing through her veins. For a long moment, they stood like that, close enough to feel the warmth of each other's breath, yet teetering on the edge of restraint. And then, as if pulled by gravity, he leaned in. His lips hovered just above hers, so close she could taste the whiskey on his breath. Tell me to stop, he murmured. But she didn't. Their lips met, and the world vanished. The kiss was fierce, urgent, a clash of fire and ice. His hand slid to the small of her back, pulling her against him, while her fingers tangled in his hair. It was dangerous, reckless, intoxicating. Everything she had sworn to avoid, and everything she suddenly craved. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Stella pressed a trembling hand to his chest. This is a mistake, she whispered, though her voice lacked conviction. His eyes burned into hers. Then let's make it again. That night, Stella lay awake in her suite, staring at the ceiling. She could still feel his lips, his hands, the way he unraveled her defenses with nothing but a look. It terrified her. It thrilled her. Across the city, Jae-Hyun sat in his penthouse, glass of whiskey untouched. For years, he had lived untouched by passion, by weakness. But now, every thought, Every breath was haunted by her. And deep down, he knew this was only the beginning. The headlines broke at dawn. Ice King melts? Kang Jae-Hyun spotted with Nigerian runway model Stella Johnson. Flashes from the paparazzi cameras had caught them the night before, locked in a kiss under the drizzle. The blurred images still carried enough fire to set Seoul ablaze. By the time Stella reached rehearsal, whispers chased her like shadows. Models exchanged glances, assistants gawked, and the designers murmured in corners. Her phone buzzed endlessly, journalists demanding statements, gossip blogs tagging her in scandalous threads. Anita cornered her backstage, eyes blazing. "What were you thinking, Stella?" Stella pulled off her sunglasses, exhaustion etched across her face. "I wasn't thinking. She stopped, unable to explain what even she didn't fully understand. "You can't afford this. You're the star of this show. The sponsors want a goddess, not a scandal. Jae-Hyun is dangerous, Stella. His name opens doors, but it also shuts them violently." Stella clenched her fists, staring at her reflection in the mirror. She had built her career on discipline, on saying no to distractions. Yet one kiss had unraveled her carefully constructed walls. "I can handle myself," she whispered. Anita shook her head. "That man doesn't play games. If you're not careful, he'll consume you." Across the city, in the glass fortress of Kang Enterprises, the boardroom buzzed with unease. "Chairman Kang, the press is tearing into us," one executive said, throwing the newspaper onto the table. "The shareholders are questioning your judgment. Dating a foreign model? It makes us look frivolous. Reckless." Another added, "We have a merger deal pending with Hantech. They don't respect distractions, especially not scandals." Jae-Hyun sat at the head of the table, silent, fingers steepled. His executives shifted nervously under his gaze. Finally, he spoke, his voice quiet but lethal. "Do you think my empire depends on the opinion of gossip writers?" "And no, sir," the man stammered. "Good." Jae-Hyun stood, his presence filling the room. "Because I built this company to crush weakness, not bow to it. If the world wants a scandal, let them choke on it. Stella Johnson is mine to deal with, not yours." The executives exchanged uneasy glances, but no one dared challenge him. That evening, Stella tried to slip quietly into the hotel lobby, but the swarm of cameras was merciless. "Stella, are you dating Kang Jae-Hyun? Do you think you'll last longer than his other women? Is this just for publicity?" She kept walking head high, but the questions stabbed deep. Her heart pounded as she pushed into the elevator, the doors closing just as a microphone nearly hit her face. When she reached her suite, she found him there, Kang Jae-Hyun, standing by the window, as though he owned the place. "You shouldn't be here," she snapped, tossing her bag onto the couch. "Do you have any idea what the press is saying?" "I've seen it." His voice was calm, almost too calm. "And you don't care?" He turned, his eyes locking onto hers. "I only care that you're upset." The words disarmed her. She had expected arrogance, dismissal, maybe even indifference. "Not this." "You should stay away from me," she whispered. "I can't afford this distraction." He closed the distance between them in 3 strides. "Then why do you let me close?" Her breath caught. "Because you don't listen when I tell you to stop." His hand brushed against her cheek, gentle yet firm. "Because you don't mean it." The truth of it hit her like a wave. She hated how much he saw, how easily he stripped away her defenses. "You'll ruin me," she whispered. "Or I'll save you," he countered. Their lips collided again, this time with desperation. The kiss wasn't gentle, it was hungry, defiant, a rebellion against the world outside. She clung to him, torn between fear and desire, knowing both would consume her. When they broke apart, breathless, Stella pressed her forehead to his chest. "We can't do this," she murmured. "Yes," he said softly, "we can. Because I don't lose, Stella. Not in business. Not in life. And not with you." But the storm was already gathering. Across town, Park Minsu scrolled through the tabloid photos with a smirk. He dialed a number, his voice low and venomous. Find me everything you can on Stella Johnson. Her past, her weaknesses, her scandals. If Kang Jae-Hyun wants to make her his queen, let's see how quickly I can turn her into his downfall. The war had begun. The rain hadn't stopped for days. Seoul was drenched, streets glistening like mirrors, the Han River swollen and restless. For Stella, the storm outside mirrored the one inside her chest. She had tried to ignore him, tried to bury herself in rehearsals, in photo shoots, in the steady rhythm of runway steps. But every moment she was away from Kang Jae-Hyun only made her ache for him more. And then, without warning, he appeared again. She was in her suite, pacing when the knock came. She opened the door, and there he was. His suit was dark, rain still clinging to his shoulders, his eyes burning with something raw. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered, though her voice betrayed her longing. "I couldn't stay away," he said. The words shattered the fragile restraint she had left. In 2 strides, he was inside. The door closed with a soft thud, sealing them away from the world. For a moment, they just stood there, the air thick with everything unsaid. Then, like magnets, they collided. Their lips crashed together, fierce and unyielding. His hands framed her face, then slid down to her waist, pulling her against him. She gasped into his mouth, her fingers clutching at his shirt as though she could anchor herself to him. "Stella," he murmured between kisses, his voice husky, desperate. "You drive me insane." "Then we're both insane," she breathed, before kissing him again, harder this time. He lifted her effortlessly, carrying her across the room. She felt the strength in his arms, the certainty in his touch, and for the first time, she didn't fight it. She surrendered. The storm outside raged, but inside, another storm consumed them. Heat, fire, the kind of passion that left no room for fear. Clothes fell away, barriers crumbled, and every touch burned like truth. When at last they lay tangled together, breathless, the silence between them was different.
Softer.
Dangerous in its own way. She traced a finger along his jaw, her voice barely above a whisper. "This can't end well." He caught her hand, pressing it to his chest, where his heartbeat thundered beneath her palm. "Maybe. But I'd rather burn with you than live without you." Her chest tightened. He was supposed to be untouchable, untamable. Yet here he was, confessing the one thing he swore he didn't believe in.
Love.
The following morning, Stella woke to find him still there, watching her with unreadable eyes. For a fleeting moment, it felt like a dream, sunlight on his face, warmth in his gaze. But reality crept in. Her phone buzzed with messages, the outside world clawing its way back in. She sighed, sitting up. "We can't keep pretending the world won't notice," she said. Jae-Hyun's expression hardened. "Let them notice." "It's not that simple," she argued. "My career, your company, your enemies." "Minsu," he interrupted, his voice sharp. Her eyes widened. "What about him? He's already digging. I had someone intercept a few of his men. He's trying to find something, anything, to destroy you. To use you against me." Fear rippled through her, but she masked it with defiance. "Then let him try. I've survived worse." Jae-Hyun's jaw tightened. He reached for her hand, gripping it with quiet intensity. "You don't understand. This isn't just about rumors. Minsu plays dirty. He'll come after you, your name, your body, your life if it gets to me." Stella's throat went dry. For the first time, she saw not just a businessman, but a man afraid of losing something he couldn't control. "You're not alone in this," she said softly, squeezing his hand. "I'm not as fragile as you think." For a long moment he said nothing. Then, finally, he pulled her into his arms, holding her as though letting go was no longer an option. But Minsu was already 2 steps ahead. In a dark office across Seoul, he pored over a dossier. Photos of Stella's past, articles from Lagos tabloids, half-truths and twisted narratives. He smiled cruelly. "So this is the woman who tamed the Ice King," he muttered. "Let's see how long she lasts when the world turns against her." He picked up his phone. "Release it. Every word, every photo. By morning, I want her name in ruins." The storm outside was nothing compared to the one about to break. The news hit like a thunderclap. By morning, Stella's face was plastered across every tabloid, every gossip blog, every screen in Seoul. Headlines screamed betrayal, scandal, shame. Stella Johnson, hidden past exposed, runway queen or gold digger? The Ice King's empire at risk over foreign mistress. Minsu had done his work well. Old photos of Stella, twisted stories about her childhood in Lagos, fabricated rumors of affairs with designers and businessmen, all released in a single devastating wave. The fashion world recoiled. Sponsors threatened to withdraw. The runway that had once bowed at her presence now trembled at the scandal clinging to her name. Anita barged into Stella's suite, pale with fury. "They're tearing you apart, Stella. The sponsors want to drop you from the show. They're saying you're a liability." Stella sat on the edge of the bed, phone silent in her hands. She wanted to scream, to fight, but her chest was hollow. "I knew this would happen," she whispered. "The moment I let him in, I knew." Anita knelt beside her, gripping her shoulders. "Listen to me. You've fought harder battles than this. You didn't claw your way to the top of the runway to be destroyed by lies. Don't let them take your fire." Tears stung Stella's eyes, but she nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. And then, the door burst open. Kang Jae-Hyun. He strode in like a storm in human form, his jaw set, his eyes black with fury. He tossed a stack of newspapers onto the table. "Minsu." Anita crossed her arms. "Of course it's Minsu. I warned you," Jae-Hyun said, his gaze locking on Stella. For the first time, she saw fear in his eyes. Not for himself, but for her. "He won't stop until he ruins you," Stella said bitterly. "And I refuse to let you lose everything because of me." Jae-Hyun stepped forward, cupping her face in his hands. "Don't you see? You're not my weakness. You're my strength. He's attacking you because he knows it's the only way to hurt me. But I won't let him." Her chest ached at the conviction in his voice. "And if fighting him costs you everything? Then I'll lose everything," he said fiercely. "But I won't lose you." That night, the gala went on despite the scandal. The press swarmed outside, flashes exploding, eager to devour blood. Minsu was there too, smirking as he mingled among Seoul's elite, basking in the chaos he had created. But he hadn't counted on Jae-Hyun. The doors to the ballroom opened, and silence fell. Kang Jae-Hyun entered with Stella on his arm, her gown a cascade of black silk, her head held high despite the storm. She was fire in human form, defiant, unbroken. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Cameras flashed. Jae-Hyun led her to the center of the room, then turned, his voice cutting through the noise. "Enough." The word was soft, but it carried power. The crowd hushed. "You think you can destroy her with lies?" His gaze swept the room, sharp and unyielding. "You forget who I am. I built this empire from nothing. And I built it by crushing men like Minsu, who hide behind shadows and scandals." Gasps rippled as Jae-Hyun's eyes locked on his rival. Minsu's smirk faltered. "This woman," Jae-Hyun continued, his hand tightening around Stella's, "is not my weakness. She is the one thing in this world strong enough to stand beside me. And if you try to take her down, you'll face me." The room trembled with silence. For a moment, Minsu looked ready to retort. But one look into Jae-Hyun's eyes, and his bravado cracked. He turned away, muttering excuses, his smirk gone. The crowd turned with him, their whispers shifting like wind. Stella's chest swelled, tears burning her eyes, not of sorrow, but of something deeper. Gratitude.
Love.
Later that night, away from the flashing lights, Stella and Jae-Hyun stood on the rooftop. The city spread before them like a sea of stars. "You didn't have to do that," she whispered, leaning against him. "Yes, I did," he said, his arm wrapping around her. "For years, I believed love was weakness, that it would destroy me. But you," he paused, his voice softening, "you've made me realize it's the only thing worth protecting." Her throat tightened. She turned to face him, her hand resting on his cheek. "I never wanted to fall in love again. It always hurt too much. But with you, it feels like finally coming home. His lips curved in the faintest smile.
Then stay.
With me, no matter what comes. She searched his eyes, seeing the man behind the empire, the man who had chosen her despite the world. And for the first time, she let herself believe in forever. "I'll stay," she whispered. Their lips met beneath the stars, sealing not just a promise, but a destiny. The city roared below, storms still brewing, enemies still scheming. But for that moment, none of it mattered. They had chosen each other, and together they were unstoppable.